Hey, Granny Gear here for Old Guy in a Bike. It's Tuesday, and you know what that means? It's Tech Tuesday. We're going to be talking about how you can protect this beautiful investment like this Time ADHX frame set from the typical bangs and bumps and rubs and things it gets when you go out and play with it. Show you how I do that for every bike I have. It's easy, it's simple, coming right up. This little roll of clear plastic goodness that's in my hand, this is racer's tape. And I've heard it called helicopter tape too. But racer's tape, this is I guess it's a clear, some kind of plasticky, marvelous material that you can apply to your bike frame in all the places where you might get a bang or a knock or a rub. And I'll tell you what, it takes the hit, keeps on ticking, kind of like that old Timex watches. It makes a significant improvement on how your frame is protected, especially we're talking about carbon fiber. Carbon fiber does not like to be rubbed and scratched and abraded because that really reduces its effectiveness and its strength. And besides that, it ain't pretty anymore, and we want to keep our bikes pretty because these things cost a lot of money, don't they? So I get this in 2 widths, and I'll put the link down below. I get it on Amazon, right? It's not cheap stuff, but I think it's totally worth it because 1 roll will do quite a few frames. So there's this, which I believe is the 2-inch width, and I also sometimes will get the 4-inch width because if I want to do a big down tube section, this will wrap around a big fat carbon down tube without having to do it in little tiny strips. But this 2-inch, this for me is the most useful size, but having a little bit of this, it's not a bad thing. So I would probably, starting out, if you're going to do your bikes, get a 2-inch roll wide and a 4-inch wide roll. So where do you want to put this racer tape? Well, any place a cable would rub. Now on this bike, there are no shifting cables, and the brake cables are going to be all internal, so rubbing is probably not going to be a thing for that. But you can put it where your top tube bag is. I have a tendency to sit on my top tube. You got to be careful with carbon doing that sometimes. But you could put a strip down here. Typical place I like to put it is here under the down tube, where maybe I'd kick up a rock or something. I'll also use it as a chainstay protector. I'll cut a couple thin strips here, and I'll show you how I cut that later, for chain rattle and banging and things. And on this bike, I would also put it any place where if I lean it against a wall, or it's on a rack next to another bike, or it just falls over, I will put a strip right down the outside of the seat stay, and really any place like maybe even the outside, the outside of your fork blades, any place where it's going to take a hit and take some abrasion. Now this isn't going to keep your frame from breaking or cracking necessarily. It's not that tough, but it'll take you 1 good hit of this sliding down like a little wall where you, on the coffee shop ride where you leaned your bike up and somebody knocks it over. Well, this is going to take that, right? And it's going to save your frame from getting any scratches and gouges in it. And if it does scratch, or you do get this to a point where it needs to be replaced, replacing it is really simple. I'll show you. We'll talk about that too. Anyway, let's show you how I apply it. Now I'm going to start with one of the big chunks on the frame. I'm going to do the down tube, bottom of the down tube first. And you can see that's about right for a 2-inch wide strip. I'll use the full width of the strip, and it's really pretty simple. You just basically lay it up against the frame, get an idea of how long you want it to be, and kind of hold that spot, mark it. Now I'll use a pen to mark this. However, there's 2 sides of this tape, obviously. One is the plastic part that you're going to put on your bike, and the other is the paper that gets removed, so you can adhere it to your bike. Do not write on the plastic part. If you want to make like a cut line, you want to make a little mark somewhere, do it on the paper part. Just do it with a pen, or if you use like a Sharpie or something. I haven't had it bleed through the plastic, but if you put it on the plastic part with like a pen or a Sharpie, then you've got to get that off of there, and it may not come off, and then you just wasted some very expensive tape. So mark it on the paper side first where you need to cut it. Well, I'll tell you, so I'm using my chesty mount for this so you can see, because I'm going to need both hands, and I have no one to film me. It's just me, little granny gear. So hopefully this won't be a complete disaster, and we'll see how this works out. I doubt it'll be cinematic history, but hopefully you can see what I'm doing. So here you can see, let's take a look at some of the tools that I'm using here that I just used to cut that piece with, and then I've got to trim some other pieces too. But basically I've got a metal straight edge ruler. You could use a wood ruler. I just happen to have these metal ones around because they don't get beat up. I've got a little retractable X-Acto knife of some kind for doing a fine trimming. I got some scissors. These are kind of like little phone guy scissors for telephone guys, but any old scissors will pretty much work. Sharpie or some kind of an easy to mark ballpoint pen, and then just a cutting board. I stole this out of the kitchen, but any kind of a hard surface, because you are going to need to make some cuts. And I also have a little bit of simple green, diluted quite a bit, so it is take the oils off the frame. Some kind of a shop towel, or you could use a clean lint-free cloth or so. That will be good too. And I've got a little spray bottle of nice clear water. Somebody gave me an old Amway bottle. Man, that's been years ago somebody gave me this. Anyway, it's still spraying, so we'll use that. So now, I'll show you with this piece that I cut here. I basically held it up to the frame from the head tube down to the bottom bracket. And I marked it and I cut it. Now you had to be somewhat careful. There's going to be some times where this will only bend so much. You can make little notches in it to get it to go around a sharp corner, but it would be difficult for you to form this all the way around the bottom bracket. That probably isn't going to happen. But on these big surfaces with a fairly big curve, this stuff will mold really, really nicely. So now I've got it cut the length, and I'm going to go ahead and clean and kind of prep the frame, and then I'll put it on and show you what I do. I don't want to get too wet with the simple green. I'm just going to go ahead and wipe it down because I've had some oil on my hands. Oh, here's the other thing too. Really wash your hands good before you start this process, because if you've got anything on your fingertips, dirt or grease, it's not so much getting it on the frame because you're going to wipe that down, but you'll transfer that to the film as you're putting it on because you're going to handle the actual sticky side with your fingers. So you want your fingers to be very, very clean. Okay, so that's good. Let me get one more towel here with the water. I'm just going to hit this with the water real quick. Wipe it down. So now we've got this nice and clean. I'm going to go ahead and mist with this bottle. I want this to be nice and wet because that's how this transfers. And then do not get this paper wet before you pull it off the tape. If you do, don't use the piece because it'll start to come apart in your hands, and then you'll be trying to scrape this wet paper off of here. Basically, you don't want to throw it away, just let it dry. If the paper completely dries, it'll pull off. Otherwise, it is an absolute nightmare to pull this paper off. And you just kind of get a fingernail in here. Now that I've got it to this point, I'm just going to pull the paper all the way off. Now, I'm going to take my water bottle. Where you spray the frame, I'm going to spray the sticky side where the paper came off to where this is beaded up really well. I'm also going to spray my fingertips, which is hard to do with one hand. And then I'm going to lay it on the frame about where is centered, like that. And then I will bring it down to the bottom, about like that. And you can pull it back off and place it, at least until you really, really stick this down. And then it's a little bit harder to pull off. So if you're not perfectly straight, or you want to move it just slightly, that's about right, I think. It looks fairly centered in the frame all the way down, close enough for this guy. All right, so let me get a towel. Now I need a towel. I'm gonna get a fresh towel. Or if you had your lint-free rag, that'll do too. I don't do this with my bare fingers because your hands tend to stick with this and pull it. So then I'll start with the cloth in the center, and I'm just going to start squeegeeing this back and forth until I start to work the water out of it. And then I'll start to roll over the edges like this. One edge at a time, so we're getting all the water out of there. If you contaminated this film with oil or something, you got your fingers, you got dirt on there, you'll find the edge will lift and it won't lay down. But just keep working it out. Don't have to press too hard. And pretty soon, it really just disappears. You almost really won't even know this is here. And that's it. That piece is already on there. And I honestly can hardly see it with my bare eye, and I doubt you're going to be able to see it with the camera. And that's that. That's one piece on. Not too bad, huh? So now, I'll show you a more complicated part. And then I think from there you'll be able to figure out how to do this. I want to do the outside of this seat stay because it bows out pretty far. And I want to have a slim piece. Well, it's not exactly a straight piece of anything on here. I think I can work around that, but it's also pretty skinny. So I'm going to need to take this, I'm going to start with the 2-inch, and I'm going to cut it as close to size as I think I can. Now, I like to come around the edge, so to speak. I want my piece to wrap around beyond just the very center of the tube, if you know what I'm talking about. So I want it wide enough to come like over here. And I do that just so I don't have a edge right here that's easy to catch and pull off. I'll wrap it if I can around to maybe not the absolute sides, but toward the sides. So what I'm just going to do is I'll get it on here. Here, I'll show you. Let me get a pen. All right, I got my pen. So I'm going to just go ahead and set it here. I'm going to push it around the edge. Now I'm on the paper side, and I'm just going to put a little dot here. And that gives me an idea of how wide I want this to be. Now the width on this piece, unfortunately, isn't really consistent all the way down. So I will probably have to, somewhere about halfway, I will have to thin this piece. This is not going to be easy to do. So what I think I might do first is get the length right. Like maybe down to where the time logo is. I'll put a little dot, dash, or whatever right there. Oop, I think my pen's failing me. I'm going to go ahead and cut this piece. And then I should be able to get both sides of this, both seat stays out of this one piece. I think it's going to be about the right width. So let me show you how I cut this. Now, as far as just like making a simple cut, I'm just going to use the scissors for the rough cut, and we'll do the fine work with the X-Acto knife. Set that aside. There's my long piece, and what I think I'm going to do with this, if you look at this, I'm pretty close to halfway on this piece, and I think what I'm going to do is cut it right down the middle. So if I take this 2-inch wide tape and I measure 1 inch, like right about here, and I go to the bottom, I do the same thing about there. Then I can take this ruler, turn this a little bit. All right, so now I can just basically lay my straight edge down on this cutting board, line up my marks, and I'm going to cut this pretty much in half with this X-Acto knife. Be very, very careful. Do not play with sharp things. Get your feet out of the way, your fingers out of the way, and your feet. Yeah, keep your feet out of the way. Also, press down pretty good on this because this takes a little bit of cutting force, and you don't want that to slip and ruin your expensive piece of racer's tape. So I'm just going to run down this lightly. Maybe do it twice. Okay. Right, that should give me 2 pieces that I can trim to fit the seat stay. Now, one thing I always do, and I'm going to do this even before I start to shape this, I round the corners, because a sharp little corner is going to catch and tend to peel up over time. So we'll round that up. Let's go take a look and take my pen and see what I think we got to do here. The length, I think, is about right. This is going to be an interesting cut because this thing kind of winds its way down. I actually think I'm going to keep this full width and see how it lays down. Because see, the problem is sometimes if you try and shrink this, it wrinkles. So I'm going to give it a shot. Okay, here we go. That's off. My fingers are clean. I'm going to spray the back of this. I'll spray the front of that. Spray my fingers. All right, let's see how this goes. I want to be up about here. Kind of get it centered. Lay it down to the bottom. It's looking good so far, but I haven't tried to lay it down yet. Let's see how this works. So now you can take this stuff back off again and lay it down. Once it's set, once it's dried, you can remove it too if you want to replace it, or you just, you know, sometimes it uglies out if it gets a little dirt under the edges or something. But well, that laid down really nicely, I think, actually. My concern was where it got tighter down here and more narrow. I think I'm pretty good. And the top of it, really nice. That's really nice. Yeah, okay. I'm good with that. So as I was saying, if you need to take this stuff off, I would get the edge, you know, get an edge, and then just get like a hairdryer or a heat gun on very, very low, okay? Especially if it's a carbon frame. You don't want to put a heat gun on your carbon frame. But, and then you just kind of work it. It'll pull off. It won't leave really any residue much. And then you just put a new piece on. Easy peasy. Okay, I'm going to add this in from my iPhone because I forgot this in the main video and I'd already wrapped up with my GoPro. But if you need to make a hole like for the top tube or down tube and you've got a water bottle boss, this is a really cool way to do it. You can cut it out with an X-Acto knife, but at Harbor Freight, I got this little 9-piece hollow punch set, and that works actually really well. You can see, you can put the, make a dot on the paper side of where your water bottles are going to be, and then you can just lay this hole punch over it. I got these just slightly offset, and then whack that with a hammer, and that gives you a very nice clean cut. I just lay it on an old piece of 2x4. So okay, back to your regularly scheduled broadcast. And that, as they say, is that. You've just gone a long ways toward protecting your very, very lovely road or gravel or mountain bike with a little layer of protective plastic goodness. And it really didn't take all that long. It probably took me an hour or so to get the whole frame done. Didn't cost me a whole lot either. It's probably 20 bucks worth of tape on there. And that, my friends, I think is a $20 spent for a good cause. If you guys agree, give it a try with your frame. I think it'll help you keep it looking shiny and happy for years to come. Granny Gear out for Old Guy in a Bike. This was Tech Tuesday. See you next video. Take care.